Uncharted, River Raid, Phantasy Star. Did you enjoy those games? If so, you have some amazing women to thank. Today, I'm here at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, checking out a new exhibit that celebrates the history of women in games. And I'm also gonna open up some rare classic games too. I mean, how could I not? This is Complete in Box. The Strong Museum is home to the most amazing archive of video game historical artifacts in the world. But a museum is more than just a bunch of stuff. It's about using those artifacts to educate people. And that's what's so great about its newest exhibit, Women in Games. So, Shannon, tell me all about the vision of the Women in Games exhibit.
So this was really a labor of love for me, and I was so happy to finally be able to do it. The approach that I took was sort of like, well, what does it take to make a game? You need programmers, you need designers, you need artists, you need some sort of music, whether that's composing or voice acting. Basically looking at all those elements and say, okay, who are some of the women who did those things the best? Some of whom are extremely famous, some of whom you may not have heard of so much. And let's put them together in an exhibit so that we can show our guests what the history of women's contributions really look like.
So one of the women that is featured in the exhibit very prominently is Carol Shaw, former designer for Atari and Activision, made a lot of Atari 2600 games. And one of the things you have is her very first Atari game, which was unreleased.
Yes, so her very first game was Polo. That was designed and programmed in 1978. It's a game of polo, so two people, on a horse. And it was meant to go along with the Ralph Lauren Polo brand of, cologne and shirts and things like that.
So it was actually a very early licensed game, essentially.
Yeah, basically,
yeah.
It was. She designed this amazing game, and we actually have some of her design documents here. You can see how she actually, laid out, the horses, for example. You can see some of her mathematical calculations of, if you hit the ball, what angle should it, flow at? These were donated to us directly from Carol, which was wonderful to really see her vision in that.
Yeah, because in the exhibit itself, you can go down and you can play the game. You've got it yes. running down there. And you can think to yourself, gee, this is a simple game, right? I mean, there's two guys on horseback, there's a ball, it's like Pong, you're hitting the ball, right. It goes in the goal. But then you see Carol's design documents and you realize that there is a lot of complicated math happening underneath this seemingly simple game.
Yes, and that's something that actually her design documents for several of the games that she gave us shows that she was incredibly detailed in terms of her math, which is fascinating to me for these, what we consider today especially, very simplistic, 8-bit Atari 2600 games. Unfortunately, the game was never actually released in the original format.
Do you know why?
We're not 100% sure, and it clearly got to a pretty late design stage because we actually have a letter to Atari from one of the managers of these stores. But for whatever reason, it got to that stage and no farther. We do have her original EEPROM that has the game code on it. The game itself wasn't actually released to the public until 1995 on a CD-ROM compilation game called Stella Gets a New Brain. So from 1978 until 1995, most people probably hadn't even heard of it.
So another great woman that is featured in this exhibit is Roberta Williams, one of the co-founders of Sierra Online, the designer of King's Quest series.
Yes, and you really can't tell the history of women in games without talking about Roberta.
For sure.
She's a designer.
Yeah.
She did some of her own writing. She was also a company founder. She co-founded Sierra with her husband Ken.
So we pulled out here, really one of the holy grails of Sierra game collecting. If you're into Sierra games, Mystery House here, which was Roberta's first game, was the first graphical adventure game. It took the text adventure format like Zork, but then what she added was that every time you went to a new place in the game, you'd actually see the graphics showing you what was going on there.
Right, yeah. So she took a very established medium, like you said, the text adventures, and just said, what would this be like if we added some pictures to it? And she was heavily inspired by, Agatha Christie novels. This was one of the earliest horror sort of themed games. The only thing she didn't do was the actual programming, which she handed that off to Ken. But everything else was basically Roberta. Mystery House definitely jump-started not only Roberta's career, but Sierra in general.
Just like with, all the documentation from Carol Shaw, The Strong also has a whole lot of Roberta Williams design documents and notebooks and things like that as well.
Yeah, so in the same fashion, we were lucky enough to work directly with Roberta and Ken to get design documents, corporate records, things that basically tell the history of Sierra. And among the most interesting parts of that are several of Roberta's notebooks where she wrote out longhand in a narrative format, in many cases, how she wanted her stories to go.
So something else that is just incredibly rare that is here in the collections of The Strong and part of the Women in Games initiative is this game Wheeler Dealers.
So this is Wheeler Dealers, one of the earliest, or possibly the earliest game to come in a box. It was created in 1978 for the Apple II computer by Danny Berry. Obviously, the first thing I think your eye is drawn to is this elaborate controller.
Yes. Yeah, that's what this is up at the top here. This is a 4-player game controller for the Apple II computer.
For the Apple II computer in 1978. And as you can see, on a cassette tape, as opposed to on the standard sort of 5 1/4 inch floppy disk. And it was, again, either the first or certainly one of the first games that allowed for more than 2 players, in this case 4. And that was because Danny was very interested in the social aspect of gaming, this collaborative, what can people do together in a game, whether it's even competing against each other, working together, which you see in a lot of her later and more successful games, especially M.U.L.E. But in this case, this really broke the mold for what you could do with a collaborative computer game. So you've got this controller, you got the cassette tape. This wasn't gonna fit in the sort of standard plastic baggy sort of thing. So when she was discussing the game with her publisher, Speakeasy Software, which was a small, kind of mom and pop Canadian publisher, she had to convince them to, put it into a box and sell it for around $35 in 1978, when most games, like Roberta's Mystery House, were going more for the $15 to $25 range. And they did an initial run of about 500 and sold about 50.
Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
So not exactly a commercial success.
No. And these controllers made out of wood, right?
Yep.
I just can't imagine putting together that, because you're probably just sitting there doing it by hand,
I would imagine.
Assembling 500 of these controllers. It's incredible though.
Especially when you think if only 50 of them were ever sold, who knows what happened to the other 450 if they were just destroyed or if they're still floating out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But we're very happy to be able to have this on hand for our guests to see.
Yeah. Shannon, thank you so much for sharing these incredible artifacts with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I'm so glad to be able to do it.
So if people want to visit the Women in Games exhibit, that's running here at the Strong through the end of the year, right?
Yes, that's going to be up through the end of the year. So if you're in the area, we certainly hope to see you. We're in the midst of an expansion, which is going to open in a couple of years, and that's going to be integrated into that. So the exhibit and the initiative itself are definitely not going anywhere.
Well, thank you very much again for being here. Thank you guys for watching, and this has been Complete Inbox.